And welcome back, everybody. So we're turning our focus now to the charges in the Idaho college student murders case. Because if convicted, Bryan Kohberger faces some hefty prison time related to each of the 4 victims that were killed. And if the case heads to trial, there's really no telling, at least now, what his defense is going to be. A common defense strategy is insanity, and that requires experts to evaluate the defendant's state of mind at the time of the crime. But in Idaho, a direct insanity defense doesn't really exist. Forensic psychologist Dr. John Delatorre weighs in on how it's applied and how the likelihood of it fitting into this case.
So in Idaho, they're not exactly taking away mental illness as part of the defense strategy. They're just simply only going to allow it to be a part of the overall intentionality that someone may have when it comes to committing these crimes. So certain crimes, right, certain degrees of felonies have certain kinds of the ways in which someone intentionally does something. So for a first degree murder, the person has to knowingly or purposefully engage in these kinds of acts. So essentially what we're saying is that someone of clear mind decided that they were going to engage in this act. There's very few diagnoses that would lead to someone not knowing, right? The idea that someone in their intentionality of knowingly or purposefully, there's very few. One of the most common ones is a psychotic disorder. There's nothing to suggest that this guy has ever suffered from a psychotic disorder. Doesn't mean that he never did experience these symptoms, but there's nothing that we've seen so far to indicate that that has occurred. And it's certainly possible that maybe that there were some things that happened in his past, traumas, abuses, right? Obsessive compulsive disorders, autism spectrum disorders. The list can go on and on and on of how many things that this person could potentially use. But I don't think any of it's going to be used if he decides not to speak on his own defense.
Okay, Terry, let's make this very clear for everybody. Can you break down the charges against Kohberger and also any possible defenses?
Sure. I mean, he faces 4 counts of first-degree murder and a felony burglary charge for his alleged role in all of these killings. Now, the murders are considered first degree because they were allegedly premeditated. And the felony burglary charge, that's based on the fact that Kohberger allegedly broke into the house to commit a felony. The actual felony was murder. So Idaho is one of 27 states with the death penalty. So if the prosecution requests that, Kohberger faces the possibility of a lethal injection. If not, he faces life in prison. There are currently 8 people on death row in Idaho, but there have only been 2 executions in the past 50 years, so I doubt that he'll get the death penalty. As for his defense, Idaho eliminated the insanity defense in 1982 after John Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity for attempting to assassinate then President Ronald Reagan. But as Dr. Delatorre said, he mentioned that the defendant can use evidence of mental illness to claim that he was not capable of forming the intent to commit that crime. So it'll take some time for this case to work its way, but I definitely think they're going to make it a priority.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I'll bring Bryan in on this. Bryan, we often see insanity defenses in mass murder cases, that not being a real option here. What arguments do you think that the public defender is going to make?
So I think the strongest and probably the only option here is it wasn't him. I mean, today everyone is applauding the police and their investigation and the capture of Bryan Kohberger, but don't forget, a week ago, the court of public opinion thought they were botching this investigation. I can imagine a defense attorney jumping on that and saying, hey, what we all thought at the beginning of this investigation is true, and here are all the different reasons why it's not Bryan Kohberger, why it's this person or that person. Don't forget, even Terry was saying, why are the police letting so many people go so quickly? A defense attorney, I think, is going to jump on that rather than trying to make the argument that, hey, it was him, but because of some sort of mental break, he doesn't have the mens rea or the mental capacity to commit the crime. That dog, I don't think is going to hunt.
And we need to see what the evidence is, right? We need to understand at least what's in the probable cause affidavit, because right now a lot of it is based on speculation. Once we have a better understanding, then we can start talking about a legal case.